The four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the foundation of the New Testament. But here's a question most people never ask. Who actually wrote them? Were they really written by the apostles whose names they bear? Or were they written decades later by anonymous authors, with stories passed down and shaped over time? Let's break it down. First, it's important to understand this. Nowhere in the original texts do the Gospels say, "I, Matthew, wrote this." In fact, the titles, the Gospel according to Matthew, according to John, and so on, were added later by early church leaders. Most scholars agree that the Gospels were originally anonymous. They don't contain signatures, dates, or first-hand claims like "I was there." So how did they get these names? Church tradition, beginning in the late 2nd century, started attributing each Gospel to a specific figure: Matthew, the tax collector and disciple; Mark, the companion of Peter; Luke, the traveling physician who followed Paul; John, the beloved disciple of Jesus. But these attributions came over 100 years after Jesus' death, not from eyewitnesses, but from early theologians trying to preserve the texts and link them to authority. Let's take a closer look at each Gospel. Mark is believed by most scholars to be the earliest Gospel, written around 70 CE, about 40 years after Jesus' death. It's short, urgent, and likely based on oral tradition, possibly from Peter's teachings. Matthew and Luke were written later, somewhere between 80 and 90 CE, and they both used Mark as a source. Interestingly, both also seem to have access to another unknown written source, often referred to as Q, short for Quelle, meaning source in German. These two Gospels also include unique materials not found in Mark or each other, suggesting the authors pulled from multiple traditions. John, the final Gospel, was written last, likely around 90 to 100 CE. It's the most theological and symbolic, and it presents Jesus very differently, speaking in long discourses, calling himself "I am," and emphasizing divinity from the very first verse. Because of its style and late date, many scholars seriously doubt that John the Apostle wrote it himself. Instead, it may have come from a community of his followers, reflecting his teachings but not his pen. So, what does this all mean? It doesn't mean the Gospels are fake, but it does mean they were likely written by educated Greek-speaking Christians decades after the events, based on oral stories and earlier texts, not first-hand diaries. Why does this matter? Because understanding the authorship helps us understand the intent, audience, and context of each Gospel. Each writer had a unique message. Matthew emphasized Jesus as the fulfillment of Jewish prophecy. Luke focused on compassion and inclusion. John highlighted divine identity. Mark portrayed a suffering servant. They weren't just reporting, they were interpreting. So next time you open a Gospel, ask not just what it says, but why it says it that way. In our next episode, we'll explore the differences between the four Gospels and why they sometimes contradict each other. Subscribe and stay tuned, because to understand the message, we have to understand the messengers.